Yale is the chair of, I'm sorry, chair, we're recording. Chair of the Board of Environmental Affairs. As I mentioned, this is an informational meeting, a joint meeting, so the city can convey as much information to as many boards as possible. Some logistics tonight. We are going to have a presentation from city staff and consultants. Afterwards, we're going to have a question and answer session with the boards to staff and the consultants. And then when we're finished with that, we're going to open up public invited to be heard so the public can share their thoughts and opinions with regard to these projects. And the projects, of course, being the St. Vrain Creek Improvement Project and the St. Vrain Blueprint. So with that, I'm going to ask Jennifer to take roll.
I apologize if I mispronounce your name ahead of time. Mr. Gracia? Mr. Feldman? Mr. Conlon? Mr. Ilsman? Ms. Larson? Mr. Lee? Mr. Bearden? Council Liaison Santos? Ms. Barajas? Ms. Liu? Ms. Ciccarelli? Mr. Ward? Mr. Preby? Mr. Raby? Council Liaison Christensen? Okay. Mr. Countess?
Here.
Ms. Saunders? Here. Ms. Montgomery? Here. Ms. Kohansky? Here. Mr. Putnam? Here. Mr. Gulliher? Here. Mr. Birchmeyer? Here. Council Liaison Bagley? All right. Pardon me? Doug Ward. Okay. I'm done.
Thank you, Jennifer. Before we get things kicked off, I'd like to remind everybody, we do have a sign-up sheet over there. So if you do intend to speak, a public invited to be heard, please add your name to the list. And we also have the PowerPoint presentation that's going to be given tonight in printed format. So, and for the boards, when we get to the question and answering session, if you could raise your hand and be recognized by one of your chairpersons, that would be great. We are recording this meeting tonight, and it would be good if the audience knew who you were. So without further ado, I will introduce Nick Wolfram. He's our city engineer, and he will be leading staff in this endeavor.
Thank you very much. Once again, my name is Nick Wolfram. I'm the Engineering Services Manager with Public Works and Natural Resources. And this evening, as Rick said, we're here to talk about a couple of projects, a couple of interesting projects that are very much intertwined and related, but are separate projects. And those are the St. Vrain Creek Improvement Project and the St. Vrain Blueprint. As staff talked about this, we decided rather than coming to individual boards, it might be interesting to gather a group of people together that are looking at some things from different points of view and bring everybody together to do this. And that's what we're going to do this evening. We're going to be further taking this on to City Council for a presentation at their March 24th meeting. And so this evening we're going to do presentation, information, questions and answers. Each of these boards will be meeting again in March prior to that March 24th meeting. So if you have any recommendations to council as advisory boards, you could make those at your individual meetings next month. Was what our thoughts were on that. We've got a lot of information. We're going to try and go through it quickly. In general, if you have questions, board members, that you don't understand something or got a direct question, feel free to go ahead and interrupt us. But if it's general stuff, we thought it might be easier to wait until we get through. And I will try and keep it moving along here. Once again, provide information on the St. Vrain Creek Improvement Project and the Blueprint answer questions, and then depending on how much time we have, like Rick said, we're going to have a public invited to be heard after the presentation and after board questions. And if there's still time after that and the boards want to discuss more, we can. I'd like to first introduce you to the project team that's working on this. And the two general department heads that are working on this are Dale Rademacher, the General Manager of Public Works and Natural Resources, and Sean Lewis, the Assistant City Manager. Also here this evening are Brad Skoll, Special Project Manager, and Kim Sugar, who caught a really bad cold this weekend, and she was going to be doing this part, except that she's lost a lot of her voice, so we're trying to let her save that for more important things. Kim's the Natural Resources Manager. I'm Nick Wolfram, and the three of us are working together as project managers on these two projects. We have contracted with consulting teams, CH2M Hill, and Kyle Hamilton is here with CH2M Hill, and also MIG is working with them. They worked individually on the St. Vrain Blueprint, and they're a sub to CH2M Hill on this project. And Melissa is here, Barry with MIG. There are a lot of other subs. I'm not going to run through their names. They have a relatively large group because it's a pretty complex project. Also, let me introduce real quickly other board staff members that are board liaisons. Jeff Friesner, of course, rec manager. Cal Youngberg, our environmental services manager that works with the BEA. Background. This didn't just start. In 2008, the city undertook a contract with Anderson Engineering to update and look at the 100-year floodplain on St. Vrain Creek. We did that because we were relatively sure the existing floodplain was not correct. And we took a look at that point in time. We actually went to the city council retreat in 2012 and talked about the existing floodplain and the impacts of the river and different options. And at that council retreat, City Council directed staff to move forward with the St. Vrain Blueprint project and to hire a consultant to look at the aspects of that, of what that might look like and how that would apply to redevelopment of the area that goes through the floodplain. Because the St. Vrain floodplain, St. Vrain 100-year floodplain is a floodplain, you'll see some pictures here, that's about a half-mile wide. And any of you that were here during the 2013 flood saw that. It impacts a great deal, a significant amount of property in the city. Not just that property right up against there, but property about a quarter mile away either side. So we were working, Brad was working with MIG on the St. Vrain Blueprint, and then in 2013, we had the flood. After that, we hired CH2M Hill. We brought CH2M Hill on to take a look at a conceptual plan, a very quick, very high-level conceptual plan to say, is it possible to try and increase the channel size of the St. Vrain Creek so that it would be able to contain more of that flood coming through the community and protect it in the event of the next flood that comes through. And there will be another one. That then led to at council direction, moving forward, and we put out an RFP and selected CH2M Hill to do the preliminary design and final design of the first phase, anyway, of the St. Vrain Creek Improvement Project. And so both of those are ongoing now. The extent of the flood, as I mentioned, if you didn't see it, that was about a half-mile wide floodplain that came through the city. Down here around, here's Isaac Walton Pond, all the way south of the creek down here into that area. Up here, it went from State Highway 119 all the way up to the railroad tracks. A large swath of land that's covered by that and a huge amount of the city that's impacted by that. So when we look at the St. Vrain Creek Improvement Project, and that's the part of the project that's looking at the river channel itself, we're breaking it into two phases. The city reach, which is from Airport Road here, out to Left-Hand Creek, the confluence with Left-Hand Creek, just past Martin Street. That's the primarily urbanized area of the city. Through the planning area, this area out from Likens Gulch out to Airport Road is somewhat different than that, but also our planning area does go all the way out here. So we're looking at that area as far as the city reach, moving forward with a preliminary design, and then are going to break that into reaches for final design. The goals of that, as we look at the city reach, protect the community from 100-year flood flows, restore damage to the greenway that occurred during the flood, maintain or improve the natural habitat with natural channel design, and we're going to talk a lot more about that as we go on. Be consistent with the concepts of the St. Vrain Blueprint for that redevelopment of property adjacent to it. Fiscally responsible, very complex project, a lot of money's involved, and we have to be fiscally responsible to that. And in addition, honor existing planning efforts. There are a lot of existing we're not looking at this for the first time. There are a lot of planning efforts that we'll talk about that have already been done and include thousands of hours of staff time and many thousands of hours of community involvement and input. The other reach is the Sandstone Reach. The city's open space from County Line Road out here to the confluence with Boulder Creek just south of 119. Very different stretch. This was our open space out here. The river channel was originally up through here, and the river channel is now about a quarter mile south of that. Mother Nature moved the river quite a ways. Different goals on this reach. It's a different beast. Here, we're primarily looking at stabilizing the creek. It's still moving around. How do we stabilize the creek to give it a chance to start to regrow? Maintain or improve natural habitat. Once again, natural channel design. We're not really worried about the floodplain out here. It's a large area. It's not private property next to the river. Still got that wide floodplain, but the concerns aren't the same. Here it is open space. Once again, repair flood damages to St. Vrain Creek Greenway. We're moving along on that, but there's a large portion of the Greenway from Dry Creek on out to Sandstone Ranch that some real major work on the river has to be done before we can get that section of it put back together and opened. Once again, fiscal responsibility, public project, and a lot of public dollars going into this, and we'll talk more about that later. So the schedule on this, right now we're in preliminary design. That's going to be started last month in January. We're going through May of 2015 on this. We're on a relatively fast track on this, partly because a lot of the funding on this has to do with federal dollars, and we have to move along in certain time frames to meet those. We're starting right now on a NEPA environmental permitting because we have to do an environmental assessment of the entire reach of the St. Vrain as part of this. It'll be required, and it's the right thing to do. And Kyle, you're much more familiar than that than I am, so could you briefly talk about what goes into that permitting?
Sure. Good evening. Kyle Hamilton with CH Toom Hill. So as part of the NEPA environmental permitting process, that's the National Environmental Policy Act through the federal government. Because we have FEMA money, federal money being used on this project, that is our federal nexus to need to comply with that permitting process. So that's in addition to any state permitting, other federal permitting, things like that. So what that process does is it looks at all of the impacts from the project on the environment and its surroundings. So it might be wetlands, it might be wildlife and habitat, other considerations. And so we will work with the federal lead, who on this project will be FEMA, to identify through the regulatory agencies as well as the public what those key resources are that need to be looked at as part of this project. When we identify those resources, we'll do an analysis to look at the impacts, look at different alternatives, select a preferred alternative, and that's what will go through the permitting process. So this is in addition to other permits that you might hear of, like the 404 permit through Corps of Engineers, et cetera. This is in addition to those. This process will typically take between 6 and 12 months to go through on a project like this.
Thank you. And I know we're moving fast. It's a big project and it's a complicated project. We're going to stay at a pretty high level tonight because we're just starting the preliminary design. So that's the level we're at, is a pretty high level on this thing. Public input on preliminary design alternatives is going to be in the spring as we finish up the preliminary design. Then we're going to start working on the final design of Phase 1 in June through December. Phase 1 will include the entire Sandstone Ranch reach from County Line Road out to Boulder Creek, and in a first phase of the city reach. And we're still finalizing that. It most likely will be the reach that goes from Left Hand Creek to Main Street. and we'll be finishing up final design on that this year. We'll carry the final design of the City Reach actually from Left Hand Creek up to the BNSF Railroad Bridge, which is upstream from South Pratt Parkway. But the first phase of construction, which we will get to in 2016, will include the Sandstone Reach, the entire thing, and then that first phase that I was talking about, which will probably be from Left Hand Creek to Main Street on the City Reach. Overall construction completion, while we'll be doing the Sandstone Reach in that first thing, to move all the way through the City Reach, we're anticipating somewhere in the neighborhood of 5 to 7 years. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later as it relates to funding. I mentioned existing master plans and related city codes. There are a lot of those, and we're going through those right now, and it's our intention to honor those. We don't need to start over. We've looked at this in great deal. St. Vrain Greenway Master Plan, Wildlife Management Plan, Rogers Grove Management Plan, Open Space Master Plan, Parks and Rec and Trails Master Plan, the Longmont Area Comprehensive Plan, Southeast Urban Renewal Plan, First and Main Transit and Revitalization Plan, Dickens Farm Park Master Plan, and there are several codes that relate to this. Some of them relate to riparian setback, residential protection setback. I will say that these studies have occurred over really probably the last couple of decades, and they all happened pretty much individually. And so we're going through those now and taking looks at these to see, do we have any conflicts between them? Does one say one thing and one says another? Overall, we're seeing more similarities in what they're talking about than there are, but there are going to be a few differences, and we're going to have to work through those and get final direction from council on how to address those. Natural channel design. I talked about that quite a bit, and I hear from a lot of people concerns that they think we're going to come in and really change things on that. And the St. Vrain Creek is an important asset to the community. And this is from the request for proposals that we sent out to engineers that says this is what we're looking for somebody to hire. The project should include natural channel design techniques and environmental and water quality opportunities that can be leveraged to enhance the existing riparian corridor and add features that improve water quality and aquatic habitat. So that was what we tasked CH2M Hill with. And we've been working with them right now. I would say over the last several weeks, and I see Dan Wolford and Steve Ransweiler up there, they've been in a lot of these meetings. City staff, from natural resources, engineering, Brad, and our consultants have been sitting down and looking at what does natural design, channel design mean, and what are techniques that we can use to do that, and how we can do it best. It's not really new to Longmont. When you look at the last couple of projects that we've done very much that. If you go over and look at the mall, and the Dry Creek concrete channel that goes through there, that was 85. And that's not the way we do things anymore. Steve's laughing back there. This is Left Hand Creek that was done at the time we extended Ken Pratt Boulevard. And that was done to take the area where Harvest Junction is located, where State Highway 119 is located, and the museum and rec center were located out of the floodplain. And that was done. Left Hand Creek had over the years really been turned into an irrigation ditch. If you went out there, it had been narrowed down into a little irrigation ditch to optimize the amount of farming room that they had adjacent to it. The city went in as part of that project and widened it out, and it's become a great greenway that provided not only that flood protection for that area and took large areas of land out of the floodplain, but has created a great greenway and trail system that's an amenity to the city. And that's the way we have done things. Likens Gulch is another one that we've done, from Airport Road to Golden Ponds just a few years ago. Another flood protection project that resulted in being able to create a nice open space area, new wildlife areas, and a great trail system that works. And if you look at this picture, that is Likens Gulch. And it worked. When the flood came down here, that intercepted flows and channelized them back to the St. Vrain that would have continued on and hit a lot more of Longmont than was hit with the case of that channel being there. So we're going to continue on in that way, and this project is going to be done in a way. It's very challenging. Different areas have different opportunities and constraints. There's a lot of it through built-out town already, but this is the technique that we're looking at to use the design and to guide our design efforts on that. Kim, that all right? St. Vrain Creek capacity and storm flows. Talk a little bit about some numbers. That's the part that the engineers like. Pre-flood. Pre-flood, we had a capacity in St. Vrain Creek through Longmont of about 5,000 cubic feet per second, flow measuring. After the flood, that was down to about 3,500 cubic feet per second because of all the gravel and debris that was deposited in the creek. We've done some cleaning, as much as we could afford to do now. We're probably up somewhere in that 4,000, 4,500 CFS number right now. The existing FEMA regulatory flow for the 100-year storm that FEMA designs is 10,000 cubic feet per second. Right now, a new study is being done by the state and the feds that are working on that. FEMA's involved in that, right, Kyle? That CDOT actually led the way on, because CDOT is worried, Colorado Department of Transportation, they're rebuilding a lot of these highways and they're tired of rebuilding them. You know, the number of times they've rebuilt Big Thompson Canyon, how much money have we spent on that? They're trying to make sure that we're getting a better idea of what the 100-year storm flows are. And they're looking at Left Hand Creek, Boulder Creek, St. Vrain Creek, Big Thompson, Little Thompson. Did I miss any? Coal Creek. So they're looking at a lot of those. They're looking at St. Vrain Creek, and the study is not finished yet, but the new numbers they're generating say that at Main Street, the 100-year storm is closer to 15,500 CFS, 50% higher than that 10,000 CFS number. So that floodplain that we had, it's this wide, is now all of a sudden going to become this wide. Because ultimately, and it will take several years to do that, ultimately this will work through a FEMA process and they'll adjust their regulatory mapping, we anticipate, to reflect that. So these are the design flows we're working with right now. This number actually came out, we're underway on the design of the Main Street Bridge. And that design number came out about halfway through the design, and we had to back up and start over on a lot of aspects. 2013 flood estimates at Main Street were about 18,000 CFS at its max. And when that happened, we talked a lot about whether it was the 100-year flood or the 500-year flood. With these new numbers, it's turning out to be a lot closer to that 100-year flood than the 500-year flood. So that reflects what we have to design around. Separate bridge projects, kind of separate, but once again tied in, are several bridge projects. We can widen out the channel, but if we don't widen out the bridges, we're not going to be able to do that. First is Main Street. That design is underway. Sunset Street was destroyed during the flood. We're working on that design. That's a regular question we get asked. The design is underway. We'll look at the schedule in a minute, but it's scheduled to be started this summer. South Pratt Parkway will follow the Main Street project. Other bridges with limited flood capacity as we look through Longmont: Airport Road, Hover Street, Boston Avenue, and the BNSF Railroad Bridge. All of those are limiting factors. The Main Street Bridge is under design right now. We're going to be completing that design in May. Construction is going to start later this summer, and we anticipate construction will be completed next spring or very early summer. South Pratt Parkway Bridge is also under design. We'll be completing the design on that next year. And after the Main Street Bridge, we're not going to close both of them at the same time. After the Main Street Bridge is opened again, we'll be working on the South Pratt Parkway Bridge in 2016 and 17. We're working with Boulder County and the Federal Highway Administration, who's funding the Sunset Street Bridge because of the flood damage. That design is underway. Design's scheduled to be completed in about June, and construction will start later this summer or early fall and carry on over through the spring of next year. And that's the majority, kind of a very high-level description of the St. Vrain Creek Improvement Project. And if there are any questions, I'll take them quick. Otherwise, Brad will go on and talk more about the St. Vrain Blueprint. Excuse me, real quick. Questions? Just board at this point in time. We'll do a public invited to be heard later. Okay, sorry. Yes. Part of that's a good question, and one of the reasons why a lot of this, and we'll talk more about that later, but a lot of it has to do with funding. That section, it's kind of interesting on what FEMA will fund and what they won't fund. And what they're not funding, FEMA is not funding improvements or rehabilitation of the creek. What they're funding is improvements or rehabilitation of the ponds, those ponds that we had out there in our greenway. So it's very complicated, and Kim could talk to you more about that at length because she's been working with FEMA very closely on this. But that's that project. And when we talk more about the money, we'll talk about a lot of them. But that FEMA dollars that relates to that has to be used within a certain amount of time. Good question. Anything else? Otherwise, I'll turn it over to Brad.
Thanks, Nick. My name is Brad Skoll, and I'm a Special Projects Manager with the City of Longmont. One of my projects is St. Vrain Blueprint. As Nick described to you, there was a known condition of the 100-year floodplain in Longmont being too small. And when the City Council was aware of this, they asked that some planning work be undertaken. And what you're hearing about tonight are two of the planning studies that are underway. And I kind of look at it this way. The St. Vrain Blueprint, well, let me describe maybe the St. Vrain Creek Improvement Project. That's the engineering project that is how the floodplain is going to function after it's reconstructed to make sure that flood hazard is reduced in the city. The St. Vrain Blueprint is how's it going to look? What's it going to look like? And what are going to be the influences that that are going to affect the adjacent properties? So the goals of the St. Vrain Blueprint is to reduce property and life safety hazards from the floodplain. Number two is an aesthetic and sort of a natural goal to restore and enhance the greenway to natural conditions, improve user amenities, and improve the experience within the greenway environment. And then lastly is to use the significant investment that the city's putting into the flood control and to leverage that money and the beautiful greenway to key investment that may occur along the periphery of the greenway corridor. As we go through these planning studies, and as Nick mentioned, there are these previous studies that have occurred, the St. Vrain Greenway Master Plan, Parks and Rec Plan, the Wildlife Management Plan. If all of those plans are going into the design principles for the St. Vrain Creek Improvement Project and the St. Vrain Blueprint, inevitably we're going to find some goals that are in conflict with one another. And so some of these that we've already identified is a recommendation in the Wildlife Management Plan for a riparian setback to preserve wildlife habitat, and the effect that a setback will have on existing properties next to the greenway, as well as any redeveloping properties on the greenway. There have been several instances since the 150-foot setback has been in the Longmont Code that properties wishing to develop along the greenway have gone to the Planning and Zoning Commission and requested an exception to allow that setback to be reduced. Another example is leveraging greenway for economic gains. I think the question there is, will the redevelopment of the properties on the periphery of the greenway be compatible with what users to consider to be the appropriate environment in the greenway, particularly where it comes to natural habitat? How are we going to resolve these things? We're going to try and take a look at each particular discipline and consider what the best practices are. So for example, on the wildlife setback, distance is one of the criteria associated with it, as well as the actual plant material in the geography of the stream channel, and what are the migration habits of any of the wildlife that'll be in the corridor. We'll try and look at what are the underlying requirements or the underlying principles that guide a specific standard like the 150-foot setback, and make sure that the best practices are employed wherever possible so we can enhance the wildlife and the riparian and the natural areas, as Nick talked about with their natural stream design. In every instance where we have some substandard conditions, or we have a design that is probably going to be in conflict with one of the master plans, what we're going to look to do is try and improve any substandard conditions that exist, and also to improve the riparian and wildlife habitat wherever possible. So we do have a series of tools that we'll be using during the engineering design process to helps us to determine which particular design aspect is more important, and it's a fairly robust tool to help us make sure we look at any type of design conflict from every possible angle that would be social, economic, or environmental. And that is really kind of the first two bullets under conflict resolution tools. The other part of it is that we need to make sure that we go out for a lot of public input, some of which we're doing tonight, and some of which has been ongoing, and we're getting some good feedback about the channel design. St. Vrain Blueprint planning area has primarily been focused, and it's a subset of what Nick was talking about, from Hover Road to Martin Street. That's the urbanized area of the city, and the intent there is to look at what would be the appropriate improvements, appropriate restoration techniques within the modified channel that are going to be most attractive to Longmont residents and what their preferences are, and in addition look at the relationship to the adjacent properties. There have been outreach efforts that have involved stakeholder interviews. We've had intercept events at Rhythm on the River and the Festival on Main. There was a design workshop earlier this year. We've had several community open houses. There is a technical advisory committee that represents the various disciplines within the city to create oversight for the planning work of the St. Vrain Blueprint. As Nick indicated, we've referenced the previous master plans that have been done by the city and the time spent contributed by citizens to that, along with considerable public input. And we've had meetings with property owners up and down the corridor, as they will be significantly impacted by the work that's being done in the stream channel. So far, the highlights of the plan look to see an enhanced greenway corridor. And if you might just visualize for a minute the St. Vrain Creek, and I'm certain that all of you have been down the greenway, and there are places in which, maybe by Left Hand Brewing, the actual channel is like maybe 40 yards wide or 120 feet. The new channel is probably going to have to be on the range of about 300 feet. So that's a lot of space in which to carry a lot of water, and you just saw the numbers for that. Within that additional space, there are opportunities to create more natural channel conditions, appropriate water quality systems, riparian habitat, and opportunities for recreation with the trail system. So there are going to be nodes of recreation within the trail system, and there are a few slides forward. I'll show you what some of those are. Now, we're looking to make sure that we expand trail system connections wherever possible to make sure that access to the St. Vrain Greenway is improved. We'll show you some slides of what we hope will be design standards for the bridges, access to downtown, some of the important aspects of the feedback that we've received from citizens in our outreach efforts and the ongoing public comment that we get back is to respect the multiple functions of the greenway, and there are many. Flood conveyance is the high priority here. Recreation, habitat preservation, and wildlife management, to name a few. To balance and create the dynamic relationship between the natural and the urban space. And this is really all about upgrading the quality of the greenway in terms of what it was prior to the flood and in post-flood conditions. We'd like to improve the visibility of the creek and its role within the region, to leverage the greenway as a community asset, and we want to strengthen the connections between the greenway and neighborhoods and other community centers. Here are some of the focus areas that are represented in the St. Vrain Blueprint. The first box on the left is the Rogers Grove area. The second box is Isaac Walton. Third box is kind of the sundial area at Pratt Parkway and the river and Main Street, and then lastly downstream to Dickens Park. So those are some of the previous planning efforts that have been conducted, and those are being rolled up into the St. Vrain Blueprint as well as the St. Vrain Creek Improvement Plan. Talking about extending access to the greenway to neighborhoods and to existing trail systems and other important locations, there's a connectivity study which shows how we can improve access to the greenway and to certain other destinations. The Boulder County Fairgrounds and the Farmers Market is one, potentially a link south to the to Twin Peaks Village redevelopment area. Another circle here shows a potential access point coming down Price Road, crossing the greenway where there's an existing bridge, and following that down further, which will give us mall access as well. Here's some of the regional pictures in terms of what the St. Vrain Greenway looks like in relationship to the Longmont Boulder or the Lobo Trail. And here's another one with the St. Vrain Greenway incorporated within the Parks and Recreation Master Plan. The St. Vrain Blueprint is intending to take design considerations and inform the St. Vrain Creek Improvement Project. So the intent is to create architectural upgrades to the bridges and aspects of infrastructure that will be found in the Greenway. And this is an illustration of the design work done so far on the Main Street Bridge. We're still kind of fooling around with some of the elements on the north abutment and columns. But we hope that that will represent an attractive community asset in terms of public infrastructure investment. Here's another shot looking north across the river. If you were in the Burlington Village Shopping Center, you'd be looking across, and this is an illustration of what the bridge might look like from the existing trail location on the south side of the river. The bridge design is intended to be replicated throughout the capital project. So here's some illustration done for the Pratt Parkway Bridge, where the columns are repeated and the same kind of railing is going to be used. This particular bridge features an overlook. Those of you familiar with the Pratt Parkway Bridge know that it can be a challenging pedestrian experience to cross that bridge. Here's one of the focus areas near Isaac Walton, and some of the things that are important to look at is what is actually going to be the width of what will be the channel area, and that's important to understand. Isaac Walton Pond Lake is up here, and it'll probably be necessary in some areas in order to accommodate the size of the flood flow to have some walled elements through here in order to maintain channel capacity. We're hoping to make sure that those are as aesthetic as they possibly can be, and there will be wall treatment to those, and also not to make them steep barriers. Since the St. Vrain Blueprint is in a draft form and we're doing some revision to it right now, one of the things that we've heard from our natural resources experts and also from citizens is to try and preserve natural areas And one of the things that we'll probably be eliminating is this crusher fines path. And the idea there is to not fragment habitat, and also to make sure we can maintain water quality by moving the trail back away from the river. And here's some more illustrations. This was the before. This was the after flood. And this is an illustration of what it might look like after that's been restored and completed. Another location, which is just upstream of the sundial at Pratt Parkway, shows that what a terracing effect on the vertical walls might look like. Another one of the design ideas that we had, which is probably going away, is to incorporate a sand beach area, because there are locations that we find in Rogers Grove where people like to go and interact with the water. But we've been told from a maintenance standpoint that a sand beach is something that sort of probably goes away every 2 years and attracts a lot of cats, and it's not a great idea, so that's likely going away. Another aspect of this slide, it features this pavilion picnic area, and there's already one at this location for those of you who are familiar with the Greenway. And we'll probably flip that to the back side of the trail to make sure that we can maintain habitat closer to the river. One of the key recommendations of the St. Vrain Blueprint is to create an extension of the First and Main redevelopment area. And we're hoping that the development of a plaza, this would be just upstream of the Main Street Bridge on the north bank of the St. Vrain. And I was pointing out to Melissa that for those of you who look at this carefully, you would assume that the river flows this way. It probably really flows this way, so that might be something else we'll fix. But there are opportunities for gathering places at this location, and it creates a nice anchor to the south end of downtown. Some of the feedback that we've had with respect to the redevelopment areas is that they should be allowed to evolve over time, and that many of the uses and the businesses that are in that area should be permitted to continue to exist. That a new neighborhood would be adaptive with respect to some of the existing buildings that could be reused. In those locations where there is undeveloped or underdeveloped land, that could be considered for utilization. Fourth bullet talks about recreational corridor and making sure that as this area develops, that it doesn't create direct competition with the downtown and the Twin Peaks redevelopment area. Connectivity to downtown and surrounding neighborhoods. And finally, respect the First and Main Plan and the Southeast Urban Renewal Area. Here's a map that shows what we think will be the development pattern in the St. Vrain Creek area. And again, this is bounded by Martin Street and Hover. And the particular area that's being looked at right here is the Boston Bowen neighborhood, and that's an area in which we anticipate adaptive reuse in there and some economic reinvestment. Another location is on the south side of the creek. This is the former aggregate property. These are some properties that have some outside storage on them. Colorado Materials is one of those. And then the St. Vrain Mobile Home Park is another location that we've been talking to the property owners about this project and explaining how we're aiming to take those homes out of a flood risk area. Another land use area is east of South Pratt Parkway and in the First and Main transit area plan, and here's some pictures from the First and Main area. That'll be the location when or if the train comes to Longmont. Here's some 3D images of what could potentially occur with respect to redevelopment along the river corridor. We're going to be modifying this slide based on feedback that we've gotten so far from interested parties. One of the things is that we'll probably reflect a wider channel through here and show more native habitat in the area. The other feedback that we've gotten is that the height and massing proposed for some of these buildings is overwhelming to the greenway experience, and that should be reduced. So we'll be formulating recommendations consistent with that and then modifying these graphics to show a reduction in the height and mass of these buildings. Here's a shot of the northwest corner of the Main Street Bridge and the St. Vrain Greenway, and an artist's illustration of what could be an important keystone building at the south end of the First and Main redevelopment area. Mixed use, commercial, retail, coffee shops, restaurants are the kind of things that we think are likely economic development opportunities in this area. Here's a little bit bigger image of a bird's eye view, I guess, of what the area would look like. To orient you, this is Boston Avenue. This would be Left Hand Brewing. We've had considerable discussions with Left Hand with respect to their plans to expand their facility. They're hoping to create a plaza area on the southeast side of their property, and they have a number of events on that property as it is now. So here's kind of the stuff that we've done so far in the St. Vrain Blueprint. In 2013 and up through March of 2014, it was a data collection and mapping existing conditions, talking to stakeholders, and trying to gather public input. In the March through August, there was a design workshop, alternative scenarios were developed, community open house, an economic analysis, and then refinement of preferred alternatives. And now, with the phase that we're in now, is that we're refining the plan. There will be another iteration, another draft of the St. Vrain Blueprint that hopefully near the end of this month we'll be ready to roll out. Continue community outreach. It's been an exciting process to coordinate with the St. Vrain Creek Improvement Project, the engineering side, and then we hope in early summer to be at the City Council and have the St. Vrain Blueprint considered for approval by the City Council.
Thank you, Brad. So I'm going to talk briefly about the financial side of things. Estimated needs for initial project components, that's the St. Vrain Improvement Project, St. Vrain Creek Improvement Project, the channel widening, the bridges, that sort of thing, both at Sandstone and the City Reach, estimated about $100 million. A lot of money, obviously. Our current funding sources, Longmont voters approved a storm drainage bond in earlier this last year, and that generated about $20 million worth of revenues. We have some other revenues from our storm drainage utility, our city street fund that will be paying for bridge structure reconstruction. Longmont voters approved an extension of that will provide that funding last year. FEMA and federal highway flood recovery funds. The Sunset Street Bridge is being funded, the reconstruction of that, through Federal Highway Administration fundings. We also have some FEMA funding for sections of the Greenway Trail and Greenway components that were destroyed that they'll be participating in. And we mentioned earlier the FEMA PAP, or Alternative Project Funds. That'll generate about $29 million for use on the Sandstone Ranch Reach and the City Reach. That leaves us, those existing funds we have, leaves us with a current funding gap of about $35 to $40 million. Once again, a lot of money. We're currently exploring other alternatives. Excuse me, we're working with the feds, the state, and other communities in Boulder County looking at community development block grant disaster relief funds that are targeted to come to the state for infrastructure projects. We're working with the Army Corps of Engineers on potential funding that they can provide for certain projects. We're also looking at other FEMA grant applications that we can pursue to try and close that $35 to $40 million gap. But as I said earlier, we're moving forward with the design. We feel that puts us in the best place to apply for these additional grants, and we're going to be beginning on the project next year and moving forward with it. In addition, the St. Vrain Blueprint that Brad was talking about, some of those enhancement components, has an initial estimate of about $10 million. And that is something that the city does not yet have funding for and is not identified for that. So we're going to be continuing to look at funding challenges over the next year. Next steps, like I said, we brought you all together this evening to provide you some information. We've taken roughly an hour of your time. We're going to open it up when we get finished here in just a second for community or for questions from the board. But and we'll be taking items to council on March 24th, as I mentioned. Project and NEBA environmental permitting open house we're going to do in conjunction with that council meeting on March 24th here between 5 and 7 p.m. up in the mall area. There'll be an open house, and there will be a public hearing on that at the council meeting on March 24th. Public input on preliminary design alternatives when we get that done in spring and summer is when we will move forward with that. And with that, we'll open it up first to questions from the board, if there are any. Any of the board? Yes, ma'am. Hang on. Sorry, we're recording this, so we're going to ask everybody to bear with us and
Now it's on. Now it's on?
it's on
Can
now.
you hear me now? When you get the microphone, we are video recording this, so they've asked if you would stand up and you ask your question. Do the hokey pokey.
Hello, can you hear me now? So Sunset Street, Sunset Bridge is Boulder County, and they're taking care of the repairs, improvements. Correct? Incorrect?
Question? Actually, we started working with Boulder County before the flood. Yes, Sunset Street roughly from the BNSF Railroad down to Boston is still within Boulder County. We had been meeting with them and working with them before the flood, and council had actually signed an IGA with Boulder County before the flood saying we would jointly work on design and seeking out funding for that. So since the flood, Boulder County has worked on getting the funding through the Federal Highway Administration. We're working jointly on that project, and we will actually construction manage it. When we're done with that, our goal is to then annex those portions of it and to also do improvements to Sunset Street to get pedestrian and bicycle facilities, which are woefully inadequate. Down there is a great new connection to the Greenway. So it's currently in Boulder County. We're working together, but we'll be managing the construction.
And so they are okay with the designs that City of Longmont is paying for. We're paying for the design of Sunset, and they're going to pay for the construction of it.
We're jointly funding the design on that. We're working together on that. That funding actually comes out of the Federal Highway Administration work, and we will be working jointly on that. But once again, they've agreed to use city standards on this since we will be annexing it when completed.
Hey, Nick, this is Doug Gollier. I'm with the Parks and Rec Advisory Board. So my question is really around semantics, I think. I know what you mean when you call something a master plan or a comprehensive plan, but we call this a blueprint. And I don't really know if there's any implications of it being called a blueprint or what that means. Does that mean it's a good idea, it's set in stone?
I'm going to let Brad answer that one.
Thanks for the question. You know, the St. Vrain Blueprint is just a brand for the planning study. So I don't think it carries anything more significant that it's intended to be a kind of a design concept or schematic that will guide the rest of the project.
Okay, when I look at these plans, it looks pretty nice until you get to the, well, we're taking out affordable housing. We've already taken out the one trailer park, and now we want to remove another trailer park, but we want to replace it with high-rise, large piles of housing in the floodplain. I don't understand that.
It might be possible to misunderstand the recommendations. The plan is not to eliminate the St. Vrain Mobile Home Park. That's valuable housing. As I mentioned before, we're talking to those property owners, and their intent is to preserve and manage that park for the foreseeable future. In the event that at some point in time in the future that property turns hands and wants to redevelop, then there are guidelines and potential land uses that can go there. But this is not an intent to eliminate any housing, affordable or otherwise.
But what about putting all this housing, proposed housing now in the flood?
The St. Vrain Creek Improvement Plan project and the St. Vrain Blueprint are predicated on the fact that all of this property will be taken out of the floodplain. That's the baseline reason for this project, is to remove these properties from the flood hazard, and that's why the channel improvements are underway.
One of the things Brad brought up, and it's not a lot different if you remember what we did a couple of years ago, just finished redoing again because of the flood, down in Southmore Park, when we worked along that section of Left Hand Creek. And we widened some of those bridges. We had to widen some of that. It was a very different project because that was not a purely nature area to begin with. When that whole area developed, it became what we called an engineered channel, as they had designed that. But we worked through that project, and in so doing, about 250 homes down in Southmore Park, because of the increased capacity of the creek, we're no longer in the floodplain. And that we were lucky that we finished that right before the flood, because those homes would have otherwise been significantly impacted or destroyed. And so once again, what Brad says is right, and we talked about those numbers of what the channel needs to carry versus what it carries now. And so in a lot of areas, we're going to have to figure out how we can widen that channel out. Like Brad said, that gives us new great opportunities. Can we create a wider channel in there and gain some more habitat area, gain some more greenway space in there? We're going to have to balance that out with working with adjacent property owners and how that happens. And that's going to be one of the challenges of that design. But the goal on that is to take that floodplain that's a half a mile wide and narrow that down so that it fits within that channel. And that takes those properties out of the floodplain, greatly enhancing the opportunities for redevelopment of those areas. In Southmore Park, all of those homes that were paying flood insurance every month are no longer having to do that because now they're out of the floodplain.
Yeah, Bob Lee. I was wondering why the blueprint ends at Martin Street and does not continue east from there. A lot of development potential along there.
Sure. I think that's an excellent question. Maybe I can find a slide that looks at that. The Martin Street as the easternmost boundary is more or less the limits of where urban development and kind of City of Longmont boundary it stops. And the potential for any kind of redevelopment on either side of it from Martin Street all the way really down to the St. Vrain confluence is primarily restricted because those properties are unincorporated, and it's unlikely that that we think we'll see any development on them. And in addition, I think the channel planning will take a look at those areas, but it's not as acute because it's not in the urbanized area that if the water comes out of the banks, we're not necessarily flooding existing properties. with the exception of the wastewater treatment plant, which we're going to
And actually, and actually, some of that property, a lot of that property south of the wastewater treatment plant, between Ken Pratt Boulevard and the existing greenway, is already owned as open space. So there's a lot of open space, city open space owned property that exists there. So no development will occur on it.
Hello, Sharice Montgomery from PRAB. The question I have is in regards to the estimate of the 10 million. Does that also include maintenance of that beautification of the creek side?
Hi, Sharice. No, it does not. We have tried to come up with what we think are maintenance costs, and I think because some of the design parameters are changing, and some of the illustrations you saw were a little bit more of a manicured greenway and more of a park environment, which is a little bit more maintenance intensive. And I think by the time you start trying to manage turf graft, you've got water quality issues and those kind of things. And I think we're probably going to the condition that you see in a lot of other greenways throughout the city of more of a native plant vegetation. So there will be some maintenance costs, and we've been trying to calculate what those are.
And who will be responsible then for that maintenance? What branch of the city?
Kim Sugar is going to be personally responsible for. It'll be the Parks and Natural Resources group that will be primarily doing that, and Public Works and Natural Resources Operations.
I also have a question, Rick Accountis, PRAB. Widening this greenway seems to me that's going to create a greater mosquito issue for us. Has thought been given to the mitigation that we're going to be applying to that without overdoing things?
No, we won't be. One of the things that we'll be looking at is we talk about it's one thing to be talking about widening the channel, but in the design of that, and we've been having a great deal of design discussions about that already, is maintaining a good low flow channel through that so that you don't end up with those very wide flat areas that become those sorts of problems. We're going to actually have the opportunity, I think, through this to correct some of those situations that we've got. We've got one out by Airport Road that we're not wild about, that we didn't do as good a job as we could have when we redid that bridge. So we'll be looking at a low flow channel because the flows vary. We're talking about the high flows here at 15,000, or we're talking about large numbers. Most of the time, the St. Vrain River is flowing 50, 100 CFS, you know? And so you got to maintain that low flow channel where you're consolidating those, not only as mosquitoes, but you're talking about fisheries issues, wildlife issues, on those sorts of things. So that's one of the focuses of this design, particularly, is making sure we maintain a good low flow channel that, that contains those flows.
Second question, $35 to $40 million shortfall. If we don't get that money, where's it going to come from, or does things just stop?
We're relatively confident that we will get, if not all, most of that, and we're going to be asking for all of it. We're going to actually go after more federal funding than that 30 million. And so that. But the construction will occur in phases. So I said earlier we talked about 5 to 7 years to do that. We're going to start on the lower end and start working our way up. You got to build some capacity down below before you can have it coming up. And so we don't necessarily have to have all of that money this year. We don't have to have all of that money next year. We can continue to be applying over the coming years for additional FEMA grants. When we did that South Pratt Parkway project, we got $3 million from FEMA on that project. So we can continue to work on that over that period of time. So it's not an all or nothing right now because of the phased nature of construction of the project.
Thank you, Nick.
Karen Koyansky for the Parks and Rec. I have two issues as speaking as a biker. One is that it would make sense to me, since this is primarily a trail right now, is to get the whole trail fixed and then do all the stuff around it, so that it can be used again as a trail. And my second issue with some of the renderings that you showed, it got me very nervous when the trail itself was very close to the planned development. That, again, as a bike rider, I can't picture riding through there without either running people over or having to dismount my bike, which I don't think is really the focus of what the trail should be. There was one picture where the development was on one side of the creek, or the river, and the trail was on the other, which I thought was great. But there was one where it was running right next to some sort of building. And I do have a problem with that in terms of what is our main use of this. Is it to have people sit on a sidewalk cafe next to the trail, or is it to maintain it for use for bikers and runners and other people?
Good couple of questions. And I got so thinking about your second one. Your first one was? Fix the trail first. Okay, first off. So right now we're working on that, and Kim and I have been spending a lot of time, and she is in agreement with you on many aspects of that. Right now we're working on the section that goes from Martin Street on out to Dry Creek, as far as we can get into Sandstone Ranch, and that will be oh, it's open. So they just opened that. The section on Main Street, because we're going to be starting under Main Street, because we're going to be starting that Main Street bridge this summer, will probably not open until we get the Main Street bridge finished, because we got to get underneath that. The other major component right now that's missing is from Sunset Street out towards Hover. And as I talked about, we may be starting on the low reach with the channel project and moving our way up. Well, what Kim has come to talk to us about is saying, let's not wait to do that section of the Greenway Trail, because she has FEMA funds available for that. So we're going to be looking at how we might pull that trail farther away from the creek so that we could install that in the next year or so and get that done, and then still have room between there to come in and do the river project afterwards. We'll have to look at how we might come in and do either a low water crossing or some temporary crossings of St. Vrain Creek to get us back over to Rogers. But that's one that Kim has brought up and asked us to look at, and we're jointly working with that on her to see if there are options for that.
J.D. Birchmeyer, Prab. The riparian setback, I have a feeling that there was a lot of industrial warehouses along Boston before the riparian setback occurred, and that people should visualize what it looks like as, say, Harvest Junction behind Best Buy, as that occurred after the setback was adopted. So am I correct about that?
Harvest Junction was done after that existing setback, but that was also a greenfield development where there wasn't any existing use on that land south of the creek to begin with. When you look at the section, for example, between Boston Avenue down through the BNSF Railroad, and there's already a lot of development that exists very close to the river. So that's one of our tightest, most confined spots through there. And that's going to be probably one of the more challenging areas to look at.
They were also about 5 feet deep during the flood, too.
There was. So the opportunities are great in there. If I come back to that, one other thing. You talked about don't be too close to the buildings. We will talk about, and we talked about finding that balance, and I think they've done a great job with that with the Greenway to date, and we're going to continue to look at that. How do we try and keep far enough away that we maintain those wildlife corridors in that riparian area that we love, and at the same time make it a very useful and efficient? I agree with you. That's why we love it, and that's why people are out, and that's why we get calls every day saying, how soon until you get it put back together again? And so we'll look at that to make sure that we're balancing those two things.
I had 2 questions real quick about community contacts, and if you folks had any numbers about the demographics on the community that you've contacted over these the past year or 2 of intercepts. So I'll tell you, I've been on PRAB for the last year, and this is the 2nd intercept I've had on this plan.
I don't know that we have cross-sectional demographics with respect to location of residents. income, ethnicity, that kind of thing. We haven't been collecting that, although in my experience, and Melissa can add to this if she likes, having been one of the people who's been at most of these events, it's really been a cross-section of all ages, and primarily people who are greenway users and advocates. So a few people that have been interested in commenting haven't been the strong greenway users, but primarily it's been people who have a specific interest in the greenway.
So is there anything that we could look at as a board as far as the community input? Is there anything been put together in that regard?
I think we have some summary information that we could share with Prab.
Okay. And secondarily, do you have a list of the community intercepts for the next, next year, August to June? August 2014, June 2015 for the
Well,
next stage?
The next event that we'd like to get input is that the environmental assessment kickoff open house, which will be on March 24th. So not only will the St. Vrain Creek Improvement Project, the environmental aspect of that, be getting underway, we'll be having the St. Vrain Blueprint information available, and hoping that we can get people to stop by and get information.
Are the community boards CC'd on these emails and invitations? Do you know?
Yeah, I think so. Hopefully, every board that's here tonight is getting the message that we're having a meeting on the 24th. We hope to be to Planning and Zoning Commission, if not in February, but in March, and they also had a presentation on this earlier this year.
Okay, and so that's the only community event you have right now is the environmental assessment that you have planned?
That's the next one that's planned. If it becomes apparent that we need to do more, I think we can set up another open house.
Okay, y'all, I'm going to give one more question to the board here, and that's Richard here. So, and then I'm going to open up the public invite here.
Richard Yale, Environmental Board. I just have one question on Ken Pratt Boulevard. Going west from Main Street on the south side, it looks like you're expanding the flood channel along there, but it dead ends by the bakery.
Yes, you're talking about what the project that just got completed. Dry Creek Channel is on the south side of 119, Ken Pratt Boulevard, from there. And so we're doing a project, a transportation project, to widen. That channel goes down, and then it goes underground and cuts back behind along the north side of Grand Avenue. And so what we've done is extend the box on the south side because we're going to do some roadway widening. And so we needed to move that over and then close that up so that we could bring the sidewalk onto the top of that box to gain some room. So that's the first phase of some roadway widening that's going to be occurring through that, and that was designed with the with storm flows from Dry Creek factored in.
Okay, my co-chair informed me that I missed somebody who had their hand up. Scott, I'm sorry I didn't see you there. So last question, and then we'll open up public invite to be heard.
Thanks, and I'm honored. So Scott with TAB, Scott Conlon with TAB. Since we're attacking kind of the BNSF bridge issue and talking with the railroad, are we talking about extending the Boston Ave connectivity to the other side of the railroad tracks at the same time, or is that a whole nother can of worms?
What Scott's talking about is a desire to make, this is Boston Avenue across here, BNSF Railroad. We're going to be extending Boston from Main Street over to Martin Street, and that project is under design or starting design right now and scheduled for next year. And the other connection link that we're trying to make is across the railroad tracks to connect what's Boston Court, thank you, Brad, across the railroad tracks to Boston Avenue. And whether that happens in concurrence with this, it is an ongoing effort that we're going to be looking at and probably will come up during those discussions because we need to tie those two together in some regards.
Thank you, Nick. Okay, I'm going to open up the meeting for public invite to be heard. We got an awkward situation here. We don't have our typical podium up here. So what I'm going to ask you to do is just stand on that step right there in front of Nick so you can kind of do your talking in the round, so to speak. A couple things. You get a 3-minute limit. We want to finish up the meeting here soon. We ask that you use the microphone. And then also when you start to speak, please give your name and your address so Jennifer can record it for us. So first person I have on the list is Sherry Malloy. Close the meeting quick, so 3 minutes.
Good evening. My name is Sherry Malloy. My address is 2113 Rangeview Lane over by Longmont High. Thank you, city staff and volunteers for giving your time and heart to this, to the city. I'm here to talk about several philosophical nuts and bolts issues and concerns I have with the St. Vrain Blueprint. First, I'd like to comment on the St. Vrain Improvement Project, which appears to be spot on in terms of its primary goals. This includes goals like increasing capacity to protect people and infrastructure, making environmentally responsible approaches a priority by improving natural habitat for wildlife, fish, overall river health, and incorporating natural design techniques, as we saw. Then there's the blueprint. The current blueprint is largely in direct conflict with the St. Vrain Improvement Plan. The blueprint's goals are primarily economic, very heavily economic in focus and scope. It's my understanding that all development is supposed to be approached as a three-legged stool, giving equal consideration to environmental and social impacts as well as economic impacts. This blueprint, the Greenway's value, is seen as an enhancement to add value to proposed private properties such as condos, restaurants, and other businesses. The first specific environmental concern for the identified areas for development include the recommendation to do away with the 150-foot required setback, which Brad did say they would probably be revisiting. I want to be clear, green land as a buffer is an absolute essential for healthy rivers. Impervious surfaces cause harm. Another huge concern is the removal of thousands of trees which make up the understory along the river to improve river visibility for private businesses. Trees are important. They provide shade to maintain the temperature integrity of water ecology. Just last night I went back to walk along the St. Vrain and around sunset and had the distinct thrill of encountering a large female great horned owl sitting in a tree that was close to the river. Her mate was a little further away. I was right under her as we looked at each other at length. I enjoyed listening to her mate call. She'd stopped when I stopped to stare at her and resumed when I walked away. This is just one of the many, many magical encounters one gets as we visit and tune into this precious sanctuary. Whereas the improvement plan outlines how to enhance natural habitat, the blueprint does the opposite. Another concern is the height of the buildings and the mass, which said is going to be revisited. But the bottom line is structures mean lots and lots of concrete. Impervious surfaces cause storm water runoff full of oil, salt, gasoline, and other toxins. The St. Vrain is a wildlife movement corridor. Recently, a bobcat with 2 kits were captured on camera at Sandstone Ranch. How cool is that? It's highly probable she came from the foothills and followed the river to Sandstone. While the improvement plan encourages habitat continuity, the blueprint causes fragmentation. I realize the time just went off.
Sherry, if I may interrupt, we are going to meet again in our March meetings, all 3 boards, and staff, if invited, will be attending those, so you do have another opportunity to share your thoughts with those boards.
Okay, I'll just leave with this final line. I think the blueprint needs to be reworked to respect and enhance the Greenway, not exploit it. Thank you.
Thank you. Ruby Bowman.
Hi, my name is Ruby Bowman, 1512 Left Hand Drive, and I am here tonight to show my support for a vibrant, ecologically sound St. Vrain Greenway that is full of nature and wildlife. When I want to get away from all the bad news I read about on the internet, I go to the Greenway because there I know I will find solace and peace of mind. So I am troubled by what I read in the St. Vrain Blueprint. Suggestions in the plan for well-manicured landscaping along the Greenway and extensive developments at Boston and Sunset and Isaac Walton and Bowen are things I don't want to see happen near our greenway. I particularly do not support the elimination of the 150-foot stream setback. The St. Vrain Flood Mitigation Project will be built to deal with the 100-year flood. In my neighborhood, Southmore Park, the Left Hand Creek Flood Mitigation Project, which was completed before our 2013 floods, was also built to contain a 100-year flood. However, during the floods, Left Hand Creek overflowed its banks. Missouri Street became the raging Missouri River. Houses were flooded, and a section of Left Hand Drive became Left Hand Lake. It was a mess with mud all over the place. The damage could have been worse if it weren't for the work the city had already done. I think this goes to show how unpredictable nature can be. When you build to contain a 100-year flood, you instead get a 500 or 1,000-year flood. Scientists' predictions are coming true concerning climate change. We will get more of these extreme weather events similar to the 2013 floods. We shouldn't be building development next to the creek. Instead, we should be increasing the buffer. There should be a recommendation in the plan of finding ways to extend the buffer adjacent to the St. Vrain Creek. As a proponent of rights of nature, I believe wildlife have the right to exist and flourish. It is only right that wildlife should continue to use the St. Vrain Creek as a movement corridor without obstructions such as that man-made plaza, without habitat fragmentation. We should emphasize in this plan the importance of habitat connectivity, the establishment of an ecologically sound creek corridor which promotes a vibrant aquatic and terrestrial ecosystems and clean creek water. When I look at the drawings in the plan, I saw a lot of impervious surfaces and buildings near the creek, meaning there will be a lot of polluted runoff into the St. Vrain. And finally, the blueprint is focused on future neighborhoods that haven't been built yet for future residents that don't live here yet or pay taxes. As a longtime resident, I value our greenway, and I don't regard the greenway as a commodity for a developer to make money off. The greenway is much more than that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ruby. Next, Mike Schnodmeyer. Name and address, Mike.
Hello. Hello, I'm Mike Schnotzmeyer, 12001 Twilight Street, Longmont. Founder of Campaign St. Vrain. A lot of you know that I advocated for mitigation measures to try to prevent a catastrophic disaster for about 7 years before the flood happened. Respectfully, I disagree with the previous two speakers. I, too, care very much about nature. I care about wildlife. I care very deeply about the river corridor. The past year has been very, very challenging for me. Personally, I suffered over $30,000 in financial losses because of the flood. I'm not anxious to have that happen again. The city suffered $150 million in financial losses. I don't think they're anxious to go through that again. I don't think anyone is. Over $100 million.
Sorry.
That was quick.
Sorry. I don't know what happened.
So over $100 million in business and other residential losses here in the city of Longmont. For me, this is about expediting the river corridor redevelopment so that the city does not have to suffer this again. We cannot afford to. If you read the budget, we're looking at, there's a line in there that we are potentially facing budget shortfalls as early as 2016 to 2019. And a possible remedy to that of cutback on social services. Possible remedy, we've already experienced increase in water rates. We can't afford to continue to increase water rates or have budget shortfalls. And I think that we need the economic development, not just for the river remediation, but Paula, you had mentioned affordable housing. residences along the river corridor, if we can look at the river corridor as a multimodal transportation corridor, a place for people instead of junkyards and industrial storage, if we can have it be a vital place for people and not for junk, not for cars, not for chemical drums, a place that has economic vitality, that can generate revenues that can pay for the river corridor redevelopment and expedite reconstruction. Affordable housing. If we can build a walkable, bikeable community and eliminate the forced, coercive requirement of having to own a car to live and work in this community, that frees up $6,000 to $9,000 per household that they can apply towards housing. So by building houses along the residences along the river corridor, that is a free market solution for creating affordable housing, non-subsidized. It's proven out. I can show you the studies across the United States. It also means that we can create jobs. Because one of the things the city has failed to do, if you look at our demographics, we have a drop-off at population 18. Millennials are leaving Longmont to go to Boulder, to go to Denver. They're creating startup jobs. They're pursuing jobs to other cities. We need to keep those here.
Mike, I'm going to ask you to finish up in fairness to the other speakers, please.
We need to keep those here. And the way we can do that is look at the river corridor as a vital, flourishing place for millennials. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Next, Anna Rivas. Did I say that right?
I've lived in Longmont since 2003, and my reason for living in this area in the first place was because I love the wildlife in the area. I love the natural places in this whole area of Colorado, which is very quickly changing, unfortunately. But having come from the Bay Area in California, Silicon Valley, and having heard about what that place used to look like, it really breaks my heart to see this place quickly becoming just like the Bay Area that I left. The place where I grew up in was called Redwood City. It used to be filled with redwoods. It's just Redwood City by name now. A professor I had when I was going to college there told me about there used to be creeks and rivers running through the town full of fish. Well, by the time I grew there, all we had were canals with, a few frogs. And by the time I left, even those were gone. So I just hope that we don't do the same thing to this place. There's still a chance to save a lot of what we have, and we need to do the right thing and preserve the beauty of this place, which once it's gone, it's gone.
Anna, could you state your full name and your address?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah,
Sorry.
it's Anna Rivas, and I live at 4501 Nelson Road.
Thank you very much. And Judy Lubo.
Hi. My name is Judy Lubau, and I live at 106 Granada Court in Longmont. I have a kind of generic comment, which is that I am concerned about the blueprint because it looks to me like it's basically saying that economic development is going to take sway over concern for wildlife and wildness in our community. And I understand that there really needs to be a compromise, a realistic compromise between the concerns for economic development and the concern for wildlife and wildness. But it looks like the blueprint is going towards the way of just saying economic development is the most important. And I don't think our community or any community is only valued by its economic growth. In wildness is the preservation of the world, but we also need apartments. So it has to be a compromise, but I urge you to make sure that the wildlife and the wild things are protected under what you're doing. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Judy, and my apologies for pronouncing your name wrong. So, one last call for anybody who hasn't spoken. Please. And again, please just state your name and your address, please.
Hi, my name is Lisa Hildebrandt. I live at 1400 First Avenue, right across from Isaac Walton Pond. Just wanted to remind everybody that City Council just agreed to look up, revitalize, and agree to undertake having a sustainability plan for the city. So I know that you all have been doing really careful work about the redesign of the Greenway area and are taking a lot of sustainability issues into concern. Since this will be over a number of years, I certainly hope that the sustainability plan will have been accepted and incorporated to, especially the economic development part of it. It's really important to have this overarching view of what we want to be and do as a community. I am not opposed to some of the proposed economic development, the apartments and shops and things per se. Again, as long as the balance is struck between preserving the natural areas, being very aware that the weather is going to be increasingly unpredictable, and we don't know exactly what will happen, the balance, but frankly, Boston Avenue is not that great to look at, and so having some more apartments and housing and shops is not necessarily a bad idea. It's all about the balance, which I think you all are hearing a lot about. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Gordon Peter?
Gordon Pedro, 2639 Falcon Drive in Longmont. And I actually started off wanting to ask a couple questions. So question number one is, we're designing very quickly 2 bridges, but the indication was that FEMA has not designated the 100-year floodway and what the carrying capacity has to be. So are we going to run into a problem here with bridges being designed before we know what we're supposed to be designing them to? Second of all, does the $100 million include the land acquisition to take care of this enlarged greenway? My comment after tonight is that it sounds like there's many incentives aimed at redeveloping, which I think needs to take place along the greenway. However, somebody mentioned balance. I think it needs to be done with balance. But my major concern is we're removing a lot of land from the greenway. We're saying this is going to be incentive for economic development, redevelopment, intensive mixed use from what I saw in all the plans here. And that is going to put pressure on all existing affordable housing. So, Mike, there could be the market solutions as you indicate, but I think that relying on market solutions for affordable housing when all the incentives are going to intensive redevelopment is a big conflict, and I'm not sure that that makes any sense. And I think we need to have incentives in this plan, in this effort, to make sure we have affordable housing and not just say, let the market take care of it, because the market hasn't done a very good job of taking care of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Gordon. One last time. All right, with that, I'll close public invited to be heard. 2 things. I want to again remind everybody that each board is going to take this topic back to their March board meeting. They're going to be discussing it again, probably with staff there as well. So if you have additional comments you'd like to share with the additional boards, please feel free to attend those board meetings. And finally, I want to thank each and every one of you for coming out tonight to learn more about this and to provide your input to probably what is one of Longmont's most significant projects in quite some time. So thank you very much. With that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn the meeting. Second? All in favor? We're adjourned. Thank you very much.